Nice
Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to have you at Transatlantic Panorama. Thank you for hosting us in Disney Hall. We are sitting in Disney Hall in downtown LA, and it's a real privilege for us to sit here.
Thanks for having me.
Well, you were recently appointed principal clarinet of the LA Philharmonic, and I just wanted to ask you, can we say the usual slogan that it was a dream come true, or was it rather an unexpected twist in your career, especially after having such a great place in New York at the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra?
Actually, it was a dream come true. I always wanted to be part of this organization, LA Phil. Always, when I had other jobs, I always thought that this city, this organization, as a model for most of the music organizations. And I remember when I was at the Met, I took my mom. She came to visit to see some operas in New York, and I thought, oh well, she saw New York, but she should see the other part of the country. And I brought her to Los Angeles about, I think it was 2014. And so we were in San Diego and Los Angeles, and we actually walked through Walt Disney Hall downtown. And I said, this is, so that would be a dream to one day play here. And
it happened.
It happened.
Congratulations. You were born in Azerbaijan from Armenian parents, and you grew up in Moscow, in Russia. Why did you choose this career path of moving to the United States? What was in your mind when sitting on the plane and heading to America?
This question I'm going to talk probably a lot. So yes, I was born in a country called, now it's an independent country called Azerbaijan. And back in the day in Soviet Union, Azerbaijan was one of the most international republics of Soviet Union. It had many different nationalities living there. Not so many now, because there was a war. When Soviet Union collapsed, Armenia and Azerbaijan had a war, and a lot of Armenians, all Armenians, were refugees from Azerbaijan, including my family. We actually had a letter saying that we're refugees from Azerbaijan. And a lot of countries like Russia, France, US, Canada would open their borders for refugees at the time, for Armenian refugees from Azerbaijan, because that was probably the most violent conflict after Soviet Union collapsed. And my dad chose Russia, to go to Russia, because he said, well, I don't speak English or French, but I speak Russian. So we immigrated to Russia when I was 6 years old. So I don't actually remember that much of the Azerbaijan times. But so we moved to a smaller town called Oryol at first, and then moved to Moscow later. And we got Russia gave us citizenship of Russia, and a lot of Armenians would move to Los Angeles, as you can see.
Yeah.
And they
nice
got
community.
citizenship from US. So a lot of Armenians kind of flee Azerbaijan, and we were. My dad chose to go to Russia, so we ended up there. I went to school there. I went to school at Moscow Conservatory, and one day, somebody from US came. Her name is Lori DeLuca. She's a second clarinetist in Seattle Symphony. To randomly just showed up in Moscow Conservatory in our clarinet studio class. And my teacher had a lot of students perform for her. And we're still good friends. I saw her last year in Seattle. And she just gave me, I barely spoke any English at the time. I was, I think, 18 years old, 17 or 18. And she gave me her personal card saying that, I really like your playing. If you ever decide to try to study in US, let me know. I could try to help you. And honestly, before that moment, I never really thought about leaving Russia to go anywhere. I don't know, it's not that I was against it, or I was just never thought about it. And after that moment, it started I started to think maybe it's a good idea. So several months later, I wrote to her and I said, I was thinking about it. Maybe it would be interesting, challenging thing. And she recommended me to several teachers in US, and I'm really glad it worked out with one of my favorite people in US. Richard Hawkins took me to his studio at Oberlin College.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's a beautiful, great place, in Ohio, in the middle of Ohio. And so when we started to send emails back and forth, my first question to him was, "Where is Oberlin?" Because I never heard of Berlin, but Oberlin I never. So he said, "Oh, it's a college about 45 minutes from Cleveland," and that's how we started. I sent him my tapes because I didn't have money at the time to come here to take an audition, and he just accepted my tapes, and I got full scholarship to go to college in US. That's the story.
Mm-hmm.
So I never really thought about necessarily coming and really wanting to come, but it happened, and I'm glad it happened.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I continued my study at Cleveland Institute of Music, and then I got my first job in Kansas City Symphony, and then the Met, and then LA Phil.
Yeah, and Oberlin College is a very nice and very famous conservatory, great school. However, the Russian music education is legendary, classical music education. So what did the American music education add to your palette?
It's both played extremely important role. I feel like I'm a hybrid in a way of Russian musical education, because we start really early in Russia, and my dad was my first teacher, so I was really educated at an early age, and my mom is a pianist, so I was really I started music quite early. And in Russia you take like music history, music theory quite early on, so that helped a lot. And then when I came here, the education here is a little bit from the other side, which is it just different styles of education, and I'm glad I experienced both. And I think that made me a better musician, that I had symbiosis, I don't know what's hybrid of two educations.
Yeah.
A lot of, for especially wind players, I feel like in US it has more orchestral kind of playing, more emphasis on orchestral playing, and then in versus Russia was more soloistic and like theoretical, like we would do more solfege, more history, but here it's really education, music education here for winds especially, really has an emphasis to orchestral playing, and that really helped me when I start taking orchestral auditions.
What is your experience being part of the East Coast orchestra tradition and the West Coast orchestra scene?
These days it's all kind of connected, more or less. I liked both experience. I mean, I love being here. I'm glad, I'm really happy that I spent 3 years of my life in New York and at the Metropolitan Opera. That really made me a better musician, playing these amazing pieces with fantastic singers and great orchestra. West versus East. It's a nicer weather.
And between the opera and,
yeah,
and LA film?
That's more. That's a huge difference. Because it will probably, if I could compare being in an opera orchestra and symphonic orchestra, it's probably like a runner that runs marathon versus sprint. It's just much longer hours, different kind of pace. You pace yourself differently because sometimes you accompany for 30 minutes and then all of a sudden you have a big solo, versus playing in a symphony orchestra. You kind of each note is in a way more important, and you don't have many places when you can relax. It's like really every moment really is important because the pieces are shorter and there's nobody. If you play symphony by Brahms or by Mozart, there's nobody to accompany, so it's a little bit different paced.
So what is your daily experience to work with such a revolutionary conductor and artistic director as Gustavo Dudamel?
It's really amazing, truly great experience. Wonderful person, fantastic musician, as everybody knows. It's just easy.
Is it easy?
It's easy to work with him. Because he has such a warm heart in both in personal life and in professional life, and everything that he does is so natural that it's not going. It's very. Everything is truly natural when you play with him.
You have a very diverse cultural background. With your Armenian-Russian background, and you are working and living in the United States. How do you integrate all these cultural entities into your life as a person or as a musician?
The other day I had a conversation with a friend about when somebody asks you who you are, what's your question, what's your answer? And for me, it's really, even though it'll sound maybe strange, but even though I don't really speak Armenian.
No, really?
Because my dad does, my mom doesn't. So at home, they chose to speak Russian. Even though I understand some phrases, but I don't really speak it well. And I still consider myself an Armenian, believe it or not, because my mom would cook Armenian food, my dad would listen to Armenian music, but the language at home was Russian. So if somebody asked me, what's your identity, I would say I'm Armenian. Because I go to Armenian church, I have many Armenian friends. And Russia had, played a huge role in my life too. I don't have an accent when I speak Russian. So it's kind of again, hybrid. As we talked about education being kind of both ways from Russia and US, and personally I kind of feel like a hybrid too, because I speak fluent Russian, even though I'm Armenian by blood 100%. And now since I lived here for 14 years, of course that plays a role in me I'm American these days too. So it's really like three cultures combined.
What role do you think music plays in communicating with different people?
When I first came to US, I barely spoke any English. And my teacher, Richard Hawkins, would just say, he would show me something in music, on the clarinet. And for me, that was like we're speaking the same language. For me, just hearing somebody talking through the music language of music, really, we didn't need to speak the same language to understand each other. If he plays something and says, you could do it like this or like this, and you choose which way is better. So it's really important that more people in the world get attracted, get involved in the art of any kind, because that really changes people's personalities, changes the way they look into the world, makes them better people.
And how do you think art as a form can support the diversity in everyday life?
Art is the one that really puts us all in the same boat, really makes us all truly great humans in every part of art. It could be music, it could be visual arts, performing arts in any kind. I feel we should really cherish that and make the next generation very supportive, and so the next generation really truly loves what art is and what art can bring to in our lives.